name's Stonesy Boy, and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today is the final reading video for Minecraft, The Voyage. And, yeah, this is the end. We're gonna see the fight with Flag and Stacks and the ending recollection, which is actually the answer to, the entire story's front cover of the book, with there being a boat and cats. Today we are reading about 80, not 80, we're reading 16 pages, which is not a lot, but a lot happens. So without further ado, let's begin the end of my favorite book ever. Chapter 31, Duelist, a long-sought confrontation, hunting for very specific treasure, a puzzle with maps. Now, you've probably read other accounts of the duel between Stack, Stonecutter, Fueg Tempero. Some of them are very exciting, full of sparks flying off diamond blades and sorcerer's fireworks. Muscles bulge and sinews strange, but there's a lot of that sort of thing. But I'm going to tell you what really happened, or at least what really happened the way I heard it, and my sources are pretty good. And while this version is less than a way of sparks and sinews, I think it's pretty dramatic too, in its own way. What really happened was Fueg Tempero took a couple of steps towards Stax, smiling that nasty smile of his. He made a few cuts in the air with his sword to see that Stax' reaction was. Stax, remembering that Hajira taught him, simply waited. He was watching Fueg's feet and the way he set his shoulders and was ready for whatever happened next. Or at least, he thought he was. What happened next was Fueg laughed, opened his hand, and let the diamond sword clatter on the stone floor. You know what, Stax? I'm not going to fight you. You can do whatever you want to me. I didn't teach you that nothing matters. Our lives, the overworld, everything we get so worked up thinking means so much. But this is just a big cosmic joke. When we first met, the joke was on you, and now it's on me. So do what you will. Stax hadn't been expecting that. He looked at Fueg with a long moment, expecting some kind of trick, the revelation of second sword, or a bunch of bandits rushing in from the secret entrance. But Fueg just shrugged and sat back down, crossing his legs at his knee. Stax glanced at Ramoa, Hajira, and Osk, but Ramoa and Osk looked as stunned as he did, and Hajira had no reaction whatsoever, because he was Hajira. After a moment, Stax bent, which wasn't easy to do in his armor, and picked up the swords Fueg to drop. You did tell me that nothing matters, he told Fueg, and you certainly tried to make me believe that, but I learned something else, Fueg. You might be right that nothing we do matters but to the sea or the stars, but we aren't either of those things. Our lives are only meaningless if we live them that way. The world can be cruel, I agree, but that makes it more important for us to be kind, for us to create a bubble, however fragile and short-lived it might be, against the world's cruelty. Fueg chuckled and clapped his hands. Oh, bravo, Stax. When I found you, you were lazy, spoiled child. Look what you've become, a warrior, and adventurer, and even a philosopher. Really, you ought to thank me. Would you have become any of those things, sitting in the solitude of clipping lawns and petting cats? I made you what you are. I made your singularity a useless life matter. Ramoa, teeth bared, made to draw her bow again, but Stax caught her eye and shook his head. I did those things, not you. It wasn't your job to turn me into anything, and your cruelty isn't designed to make anything. It serves nothing except your own selfishness. And now, I'm going to make sure you can never hurt anyone else. Ah, finally, said Fueg, spreading his arms, thrusting his chest forward. Very well, Stax. Strike true, and try not to make a mess of it. No, Fueg, I'm not going to kill you. Too noble to do the deed yourself, eh? Asked Fueg, glancing at Ramoa and Hajira. So, who would it be? The hot-blooded archer or the mysterious swordswoman? Neither, said Stax. I'm going to leave you to my friend, the artificer, Osk, who now, what we discussed, seen the fortress. Do you have everything you need? Oh, yes, said Osk, pausing to give Fueg a little bow. It's a complicated design, relying on obsidian and lava and water and pistons. I'd need lots of redstone. But I've been thinking about it since Stax suggested it away at Tumble's Harbor. I'm pretty sure it'll work. An impenetrable prison. Claw through the obsidian and wham, a new block of it snaps into place. Sounds ingenious, Fueg said. But no thanks. I'd rather die. I'm sure you would, Fueg, Stax said. But you aren't going to. You're going to live, and comfortably. But you'll spend the rest of your days alone. No minions to boss around, no victims to torment, no shiny stolen baubles to distract you for a minute or an hour a day. It'll just be you, alone but with yourself, which I think is the only thing that really frightened you. Fueg for once had words, but Ramoa did. Total insulation? She asked. That's a lot, Stax, for anybody. He won't change. Don't make the mistake of thinking he will, Ramoa frowned. But Stax had already turned back to Fueg. Ramoa, I will see that you're comfortable and secure until Osk prison is built. Osk, this is where anything else you need? Osk shook her head. A drawing table, some paper, and help, all of which I have. Don't you want to know why, Stax? Fueg asked in an unnaturally quiet voice. You asked me that a while back. You didn't deserve an answer then, but you do now. I don't want your answer, Stax said. But I don't want to know why, Fueg asked, incredulous. Find that impossible to believe. I don't, because to be honest, I don't care. And I'm not going to let you invent some reason for you what you've done, because it would just be another lie. You're like a hazard deep in a mine, Fueg, like a lava fall or dungeon full of monsters. It's just a waste of time trying to convince lava not to burn or monsters not to attack. Instead, you wall those hazards up and put up warning signs. And once you've done that, you don't have to think about them anymore. Fueg resisted briefly, but he trusted and watched Romoa while Stax found a pickaxe in one of the fortress storerooms, dismantled the nether portal, and used the obsidian to construct a temporary cell. With that pleasant task completed, they explored the fortress, discovering it contained a courtyard open to the sky with shaggy oak trees. Hajira, to everyone's relief, decided that this didn't count as shelter and immediately climbed into a tree's branches to sleep and heal. Stax turned to Fueg's hall and all the loot it contained. He pawed through gems, looking through stacks of paintings, examined banners for hours. In the corner of the room, he found two simple wooden frames, one enclosing a stone pickaxe worn down to a snub, and the other housing a door and notched stone sword. Do you recognize those things? He asked Ramo. I do, said Stax. Those were my grandmother's. They used to hang in the wall behind our garden. Once I wanted to get rid of them, but now I know better. He put them aside to examine the next pile of things, and nodded that there was a banner with the Stonecutter family crest, a blue triangle with an orange field, and now were long rolls of paper. Could you help me spread these out? He asked Romoa, and they brought them to a table in armloads. Stax hoped they were the father's maps, but simple for the outposts he set up in the ocean voyages he made to sell stone. They're all out of order, said Romoa, frustrated. It's like a giant puzzle. My grandmother and I used to do puzzles all the time, said Stax. I'm sure we can solve it. And they spent the next couple hours rearranging maps and turning them this way and that, and standing atop a table for a better view, and making suggestions that went nowhere, and trying to convince themselves that coastlines fitted together, and when they actually didn't. But little by little, the right answers began to outnumber the wrong guesses, until finally the table was covered with a huge map of land and seas. Romoa studied it, walking around and around it with her hand on her chin, until her eyes lit up and she laid her finger on a stretch of coastline. I think that's Desolation Bay, she said, which would mean you and I met about here. And if you go up the coast to the north, here, Tumbles Harbor, said Stax. He smiled at Romoa, and then why the discovered hit him, and he felt his knees go weak. He brought his hand to Desolation Bay, and this time he followed the coast west, to the wide body of water that had to be the Sea of Sorrows, and from there further west. There's my little peninsula, he said. He felt tears start to in his eyes. He knew he was right. He knew the little spikes of blue right off the coast represented the ice floes, and an orange chevron next to him. Here's home. Romoa nodded and showed Stax where her own finger was resting on the patch of green and dotting the coast some distance down the Desolation Way. What's that? Stax said. River House, she said. My home. Which you better come see. It took a couple of weeks for Osk prison to be finished, and took another couple of days to test it, to ensure Fueg wouldn't be able to escape. The completed prison was striking, if a little odd-looking. A seemingly solid block of obsidian covered half of Fueg's fortress, with lava surrounding it, an artificial lake and the roof of perimeter pistons in the lava. Inside the two of the rooms had been converted into a small farm and a pen for cows and pigs, while the others restrained their creature comforts. Fueg would have a bed, furniture, some paintings, and books. Everything except the freedom he used to hurt others. And the prison came with other layer of certainty. Oscar announced that if they were all right with others, he'd set up a shop in the rest of the fortress. As Fueg's custodian, the fort would make an excellent laboratory and a sprawling home. Then word spread that the ballad men atop the mountain would have run off. Farmers and traders would follow the river east to Karamis to become Osk's neighbors. With a glance at Romoa, Osk said she'd keep watch over Fueg, and if she had showed any sign of her acceptance for what he'd done, and she added a glance at Stax, she'd alert to his tricks. Fueg would be charming his way out of his prison and difficult as digging his way free. Stax, Romoa, and Hajira said their farewells to Osk on a crisp, clear morning and walked back to Karamis. There, Romoa said a not particularly reluctant farewell to her house. The donkey reluctantly weighed down the chest of redstone, now blissfully unencumbered. Stax had taken a small amount of diamonds and lapis as father's maps, the stonecutter banner, and a frame with his mother's tools. The rest he'd given to Osk. Stax and Romoa had rented rooms in Caravasani, and that was dusk. Stax's stomach rumbled. Goodbye, Hedgie, he said, embracing the black-clad warrior. Thank you for everything you taught me. And I, in turn, thank you, Ajir said. Your path has been a fascinating one to observe, and I remain keenly interested in your destiny lies. So do I, said Stax. Farewell for now, my friend, said Rameau, hugging Hajira. I'll come see you at River House. It's been too long since I've been home, and I think I'll stay a while. I'm glad your path is returning you there, Hajira said, and embraced her. Hope it leads you to a peace you deserve and enjoy. Where are you going, Hedgie? Stax asked, when the two old friends parted. You haven't said. North, said Hajira, with a smile faded. I will watch for signs of the raiders are regrouping, and I will seek word of Miggs. I believe he needs another nudge into a better path. It might make for more than a nudge, said Stax. It might, said Rameau, but Hedgie can nudge pretty hard. Chapter 32. Two Shores. A tower revisited, a familiar peninsula, and a long-awaited reunion, the future considered. After parting ways with Ajir, Stax and Rameau traveled through the forested hills, sprawling meadows, and rolling grasslands. They set a leisurely pace, and Rameau was telling Stax about the caravan she'd guarded, amazing vistas she'd always wanted to return to, and lands known to her only through travel tales. Each night, they'd look at one of the stonecutter maps to try to trace routes Rameau had walked and find places she'd been. The time passed pleasantly, but it passed, and one afternoon Stax stopped Rameau, sniffing the air. What is it? She asked. The sea, he said. I just realized how much I missed it. Another hour's walk brought them to the caravan track that led north of Tumbles Harbor, not far from where they met. And a few minutes later, Stax was standing in the shallow water at the eastern end of Desolation Bay. Looking west of the sun had already been low on the horizon. They passed the night in a little hollow hacked out of rocky hill. Tomorrow they would be parted, with Rameau heading south through the shining desert and Stax heading west toward home. They talked a number of things, like a bizarre experiment Oscar might actually make work and the demanding new rules of Hajira would dream up for himself. But mostly they simply enjoyed each other's company. In the morning, Rameau sat on a rock on the seashore, ignoring the bees humming around her head and shooing away curious sheep, while Stax built a crafting table and hammering another little boat from old logs. They discussed the route Stax would take home. Stax would have studied the map so many times that he would almost see it with he closed his eyes, and now best to avoid perils along the way. Until finally the boat was finished and time to part. They hugged each other for a minute, or maybe it was two, and Stax smiled. Don't worry about me, he said, because he couldn't tell Rameau he was doing exactly that. I have this. And then he showed her the compass he carried from his pocket for so many months. Is this what you found on the beach? The one Voig dropped? It is, Stax said, looking down at it. I was convinced it was his, and maybe it was. But at some point in the journey, I stopped thinking about it that way. My father would have used one like this, and who knows, maybe this was my dad's, before one of Voig's raiders stole it, which could mean it came back to me. I like that, said Rameau. Let's tell the story that way from now on. Agreed, Stax said, and returned his father's compass to his pocket. He checked for leaks one last time and pushed the boat into the sea, standing next to it in the shallow water with one hand on the gunwale. I circled River House on your map, Rameau said. When you're ready, come see me, and if I'm not there, I'll be again soon. A girl does get restless. I will, said Stax, and clambered into his boat. He rowed for a minute and looked back to see Rameau's figure growing rapidly smaller on the shore. He raised his hand for farewell, and a moment later, she did the same. Stax got close to the southern shore and found himself rowing past the barren desert across he'd come to know all too well. He knew well the shining desert and avoided by wise travelers, which he knew was a rowing across Desolation Bay before he had named for these places. Now he knew what they were called, and could look at his father's maps and find them sketched out in a miniature. At mid-afternoon, Stax saw a little black dot on the shore ahead. He knew what it had to be, but it was still a strange sensation to discover that, yes, he returned to the patchwork tower, and Fueg's raiders had left him. It was a place where he thought he would die, but instead came to the place where he learned how to save himself. Stax stopped rowing and let his boat drift for a moment. Ahead, he could just spot a keel of shipwrecked boat off of the shore, and he plundered the wood to make a boat. Stax looked at the position of the sun in the sky and thought about his route through Desolation Bay, calculating how far he had come and how far he might still go before he needed to find shelter. Then he realized what he meant. He frowned and started to do calculations again, and then stopped. Oh, what the heck, he said, and rowed for the shore. The tower smelled of salt and charred wood. Stax spread out his bedroll, relit the furnace, and pondered whether he wanted to eat beefsteak or a couple slices of pie. He decided on pie, and after dinner he stood outside the tower and watched the sun sink into the sea. As Stax was getting ready for bed, he considered his choices for breakfast. Something growled outside the door, the noise ending in a gurgle of seawater. Oh, get lost, Stax called out. We've done this. He decided against dried kelp for breakfast, though. In the morning, Stax bid the tower farewell and rowed west. And I'm happy to say, for the next several days, the story wasn't terribly interesting. Each morning he checked his route on the map, decided how far he would go, and figured out a likely stretch of coast, where he would look for a place to rest for the night. Then he rowed, glanced at the compass, kept to the bench inside, and ensured he was going the right course. He rowed past the desert shores and shipwrecks and broken towers. He crossed the long stretches of empty sea. He stopped for a moment to give thanks when he spotted ice floes and spiky towers. He failed to reach on his first attempt to return home. Then he rode carefully among them, seeking the path through the ever-changing obstacles posed by the ice. Other than the polar bear snarling at him, he met no mischance. And then, around noon one day, he came through the ice and spotted green ahead of them. It was a peninsula with a little hill behind it, green and dotted with white birches. Only a small part of the overworld, perhaps, but one that meant everything to him. Stax brought the boat to the end of the broad green lawn, now overgrown with tall grass and interrupted with stumps of birch trees, which were left with broken fences, a single pumpkin growing amid the weeds. But to his right, flowers were growing with wild abandon, turning the hillside into a happy riot of red, pink, and blue and white. Stax walked up the lawn, past the stagnant green pool with a broken fountain, and climbed the flight of polished diorite steps, now gaped to with sprouting weeds. Atop the hill was a jumble of shattered rock, black and white diorite, and pink granite. To his left, the sea curled around the peninsula, with splintered dock and the wreckage of the boathouse. "Well, I'm back," said Stax, sitting on a hunk of diorite, surveying the ruins of the stonecutter estate. His mind went back to the day of the fire and horror, and voyage had brought his raiders, and Stax's life had became crashing down. But voyage was locked away and the bandits were scattered. And looking at the wreckage around him, Stax started thinking of the stone blocks that would be fit together, and tall grass that would be cleared, and the trees that would be planted. He heard a low noise somewhere nearby and got to his feet, wondering if his ears were playing a cool trick on him. But no, it was real. Attentive, quiet meow, and a black head and golden eyes peeked out at him behind the dark diorite. "Cole?" Stax asked. "Cole, come here, kitty. Come on, it's okay." Cole, always the boldest of his cats, emerged in the jumble of fallen stone to regard. Stax suspiciously interrogated him with further meows, and her tail went up a moment later, and she was twinning herself around his legs, bedraggling but purring. Stax heard more meowing and looked at his stroking Cole to see a gray striped cat with green eyes and Siamese with blue eyes poke their head out of their own hiding places. "Emerald, Lapis." A moment later, Stax was surrounded by cats meowing and accompanying for pats. "It's so good to see you, kitty," Stax said. "Funny, you don't look as skinny as I would have guessed. Seems like we are what we're capable of, huh? Though I bet a fish or three would be nice to have, am I right?" Fortunately, Stax had a fishing rod. He learned something from his hungry days at Desolation Bay, so he retrieved it from his boat and stood in a splintered dock until he landed 3 cod, which Cole, Lapis, and Emerald quickly reduced to bones. Emerald meowed for more, and looked doubtful when Stax assured them that the days of shameful neglect had ended. But he was looking for a burned-out boathouse and thinking about the shelter for the night, and it would be beyond ridiculous to make it all the way home, only to be caught outdoors after dark and obliterated by a creeper in its nocturnal rounds. And so, Stax spent the rest of the afternoon making an improved shelter where the boathouse had stood, and the ramshackle construction, honestly, it made the tower in Desolation Bay look like a palace, but it would keep out rain, wind, and hungry creatures of the night, which was good enough for now. Stax even found a few squares of carpet that had been entirely burned, and laid them out to cover some of the floor. And in the morning he woke up to the stonecutter estate, with Cole on his left, Emerald on his right, and Lapis stretched out on his chest, and simply lay there for a while, smiling in happy disbelief. A couple days later, the employees of Stonecutter offices were stunned to discover that Stonecutter was not, in fact, dead, and there's even more stunned when he arrived carrying Father's maps and full of questions about outposts and trade agreements and dozens of other things in which he never before shown the slightest interest, and they were absolutely flabbergasted when he thanked them for keeping the business in working order. It's not just like, well, he presumed dead, but for all the years he'd been alive and barely noticed his existence. The employees were also surprised to be invited out to the estate, along with many Stax's neighbors. The estate had changed too. The day after he returned, Stax started clearing away the debris of the house and cleaning up the lawn, ridding it of birch stumps and weeds. Soon after that, he drained the water from the mine in the back garden, and that was a big job, and patched the mine's roof. But after thinking about it a while, he closed not to rebuild the big house that sat on the hill, the one made of diorite and granite, the one that shone in the sun. Instead, he cleared the hilltop of shattered stone, filled the stagnant fountain, and removed the broken staircase, so that visitors found green hill and the low lake and a garden with a small, well-kept family cemetery. What Stax did rebuild was the boathouse, the best he remembered. It was cozy, but big enough for his bed, as well as a chest, bookcase, furnace, and a crafting table. Windows overlooked the sea, and Stax hung his grandmother's stone pickaxe and his sword side by side to the wall. He rebuilt the dock too, and visitors could use to the landing here they had business at the Stonecutter estate. Most of the time they found Stax sitting at the table in the dock, with the cat snoozing in the sun, reading a book about mining or studying one of the Father's maps. Stax would greet these visitors warmly, thank to them for not coming to the old landing on the lawn we was no longer used, and proved quite able to talk about things besides cats and flowers. Though visitors did not know, Stacks could talk to those cats quite a bit, and occasionally was found having conversations with himself. For a long time, it was definitely weeks. It might have been months. Stacks was happy, but over the time, restless crept into his thoughts. He found himself retracting the route in the stone-colored peninsula to Desolation Bay, and where the tumbles harbor, the range jungles of Jagatel, and the village of Pentanos, and the caravan town of Karamis. But the route he traced most often led to the place on one map, surrounded by a circle drawn by the hand of a friend. Until one morning, Cole and Lapizero had meowed quite a bit more than usual to remind Stacks of his responsibility to catch fish and deliver breakfast. Instead, he was packing up maps, trying on armor and swords through chests, without noticing 3 cats who were becoming terribly hungry. Stacks apologized and caught some guard, but the cats had only just finished picking the bones clean when he carried them into a boat, instead of rearranging the chairs on the dock so he could snooze in the sun. The cats weren't sure about the odd break in their routine, but they were so full and sleepy to object strenuously, and before they could grasp what's happening, Stacks had rowed the boat away from the docks and was looking back and forth between the sun and the father's compass. "Come on, kiddies," he told them with a smile. "Let's go see the world." Oh, my heart. Seriously, my heart. Ah, my God. Literally brings tears to my eyes every single time. But that is Minecraft The Voyage, baby. Being another book done on the channel. And my favorite, as a matter of fact. Oh, but that story is so wonderful. With the start of him being a little lazy rat to the ending of him becoming a better and yet stronger person. As a matter of fact, you know how last episode we read it then? Well, this is actually right after that because I wanted to finish this book. Anyways, hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. Be polite, be efficient, and I hope you guys have some type of journey like this. And I hope your code is never broken. Bye-bye!